Hi, my name is Julie, and I am delighted to welcome you to Cambrian College and to welcome you to the Cambrian College community. Our goal for today is to have a conversation about how we can keep that community safe. We're going to talk about how we can respond to sexual violence and what we can do to prevent it. So we're going to do that in 4 steps. First, we're going to talk about what is consent. Then we're going to unpack what sexual violence is. Then we're going to talk about what we can do to report it if we witness it or we hear about it happening. And then we're going to end with some strategies that we can use to try to prevent the violence from happening in the first place. So right from the jump, as someone who works to address sexual violence across Canada, I often get asked, what exactly is sexual assault? And people get really caught up on the specific definitions. And that's an important part of the conversation, and we'll get to that. But I think it's more important to start from a place of what is consent? Instead of constantly talking about what we don't want, let's talk about what we do want, which is a consent culture. So what is consent? Well, in Canada, consent is defined as the voluntary agreement of the complainant to engage in the sexual activity in question. So there's kind of 3 main parts to that are really important to retain. The first is that it's voluntary. Coercion is not consent. If someone is saying yes to you because they're afraid of the consequences of saying no, that's not a true yes. Secondly, you'll notice it says sexual activity. So it doesn't matter how you define sex versus how the other person does. All forms of sexual activity in Canada require consent. And the third big piece is that in question, which means you have to give consent to very specific things. There's no such thing as sort of a broad yes to whatever that person can put their mind to. We're being specific, and I know exactly what I'm saying yes to. And if we want to move to doing something else, we just got to make sure that we check in with each other. So there are some caveats to the definition of consent in Canada, and I'm giving you this word for word from the criminal code, so you know that this is the standard definition that we are using all across Canada. So there's no consent where the agreement is expressed by the words or conduct of a person other than the complainant. What that means is you can't give consent on behalf of someone else. If you want to know if that person's into it, if you want to, see those pictures that belong to someone else, you have to ask that person specifically if they're okay with it. There's also no consent in Canada where the complainant is incapable of consenting to the activity. What that means is, yes, there is absolutely a time when someone is too drunk to consent. If someone is drunk, high, unconscious, asleep, medicated in some way where they don't really have their wits about them, they are not in a position to be able to consent. We want to make sure that we're doing things with folks who are very much aware of what they're agreeing to and will wake up tomorrow with a complete understanding of what went down. There's also no consent where the accused induces the complainant to engage in the activity by abusing a position of trust, power, or authority. So I'll give you 2 specific examples that relate to the Cambrian College community. At Cambrian, a faculty member cannot initiate a relationship with one of their students. Additionally, an admin cannot initiate a relationship with anyone who reports to them or is in a direct line of authority to that position. There's also no consent where the complainant expresses by words or conduct a lack of agreement to engage in the activity. Translation, only yes means yes. If you ask someone and they don't answer you, they push you away, they give you a, no, that's not a yes. We're doing absolutely nothing with folks without checking in on them. And the second they say no, we're stopping. You don't have to say no and punch someone in the face for your no to be heard. If you do not communicate at all, if you remain passive, if you freeze, you are not consenting. Lastly, there's no consent where the complainant, having consented to engage in sexual activity, expresses by words or conduct a lack of agreement to continue to engage in the activity. What does that mean? It means if I said yes to making out and I'm having a time, and then I decide I don't want to be here anymore, I have the right to say, I don't want to be here anymore, even though I was into it 10 minutes ago. Also important to note that if you make plans with someone on a Monday, that you're going to meet up on Wednesday, it's very clear that this is a hookup, you're both into it, you both know what you want out of this situation. That person shows up on Wednesday and they're just not feeling it. You don't look like your picture, your apartment's really gross, they're just not vibing with you. They absolutely have the right to back out of that situation. And you don't get to use your text messages from 3 days ago to say, hey, we had an understanding. You're allowed to be disappointed that that person changed their mind, but they absolutely have the right to change their mind. What I said to you 3 days ago, 3 years ago, does not matter. What I'm saying right now is what we need to understand. So consent in Canada is really clearly a moment in which you are making sure that person is voluntarily agreeing to participate. So they're there because they're jazzed to be there, not because they feel pressured or guilt tripped. 2, everyone involved is sober enough that they know exactly what's going on and they know exactly what they've agreed to. We're only taking enthusiastic responses as a yes. So we're not taking someone freezing, just pushing us away, kind of hemming and hawing. No, we want to be very clear that we're only doing things with people that are enthusiastic about doing those things with us. And lastly, we're not making assumptions. So even if you've been dating someone for 20 years, if that person says no to you, you have to respect their no. Now, this is important for us to know as people entering into relationships with other people, but it's also important for us to know that as bystanders, because you might be observing something happening and it's a form of violence and you're not even cognizant of it because you haven't thought about how, hey, that person's way too drunk to be able to leave here with that stranger. So it's really important for us to know what consent is in our interpersonal relationships, but also in our friendships when we're hanging out with other people, to be able to keep our eyes peeled and to know what to look for. So knowing what consent is, I want to give you the definition of sexual violence that Cambrian College uses. It's really comprehensive. So sexual violence is defined as any sexual act or act targeting a person's sexuality, gender identity, or gender expression, whether the act is physical or psychological in nature, that is committed, threatened, or attempted against a person without the person's consent. And it includes sexual assault, sexual harassment, stalking, indecent exposure, voyeurism, and sexual exploitation. So if you've experienced any of these forms of violence, I want you to know that we are really, really sorry. I'm so sorry that that happened to you. But I want you to know that you are not alone and that there are absolutely folks on campus who are trained to hear you out, to help you manage what to do next, and to really give you the power to decide how you want to proceed. It's your story. It's your experience. You are in control of what happens. You can take your time. So there's this very pervasive myth that we have in Canada that there's a time limit to when you can report sexual assault. I honestly think it's because most of us grew up crushing hours of Law and Order SVU and watching news stories like Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby, where in the US, in several states, there's absolutely a time limit where you have to report your sexual assault within 2 or 5 years, or else you lose the right to ever come forward. And so we hear these stories in Canada and we assume, oh, that must be the case here, but it's not. It is not the case in Canada. If you want to report a sexual assault that happened to you 25 years ago, you absolutely have the right to do that. So don't feel pressured. Don't feel like you have to make a decision right away. Take the time that you need. Also, if you do decide you want to file a complaint, either with Cambrian or wherever, you can revoke your complaint. You can change your mind. If you decide that it's too scary, it's too overwhelming, you don't have the energy for it, that's okay. You can absolutely pull that complaint. Because fundamentally, it's your story. It's your life. It's your experience. You should have complete control over what happened. At Cambrian, we recognize that by definition, sexual violence is taking someone's power away from them. Someone said no, and someone else did something anyway. So it's really important that how we respond to sexual violence, both as a campus, but also just as individuals, as friends, is trying to give that person as much power back as humanly possible. That's really our job as allies to survivors. So if you've been assaulted, know that you get to decide what happens next. You are always in the driver's seat. And this is our commitment to you. If you do decide to report to us, if you do decide to report to the administration or to counseling services, you will be treated with dignity and respect. You will be believed. So we always start from the place that someone is telling the truth. You will be informed of all available services and resources. You get to decide which services you choose. If you don't want to call the police, you don't want to involve them, you don't have to. If you just want to get some Physical medical services, you can do that. If you just want to talk to someone, if you just want to explore what your options even are, you get to decide what happens next. You also get to decide whether you want to file a report with the police or campus security. If you just want to talk to someone about it, if you just want to get it off your chest, if you just want to see what your therapy options are, for example, you can do so. And you will be assisted in making a safety plan. If you are harmed by someone within the campus community, if you were harmed by someone that lives in your apartment or that you have to deal with for whatever reason, we will work with you to come up with a safety plan to keep you as safe as possible. And related to that, you're also going to be assisted in limiting your unwanted contact with the person that you say harmed you. So whether that's accommodations academically, whether it's accommodations in terms of your housing, your schedule, we will work with you to come up with a plan that keeps you safe and allows you to keep doing your work, allows you to maintain your studies. You have the right to be on campus, and you deserve support services, and we have those services for you. So I'm going to give you all of the resources here. If you want to screen grab them, if you want to make sure that you keep those in your back pocket. Again, not just because of your own experiences, but also as an ally. If a friend discloses to you, do you know where to refer them? Would you know where to send them? Do you know what to do? So having this information on hand is really handy. And I honestly really think of it as like, 911 or poison control or something. If you're doing childcare and there's kids around, you want to know, okay, what do I do if one of these kids swallows something they shouldn't be swallowing? It's the same thing with, knowing the services for mental health crises, knowing the services if someone's been assaulted. It's just good practice for us to be informed about how we can support the people in our lives who have been harmed and who are dealing with trauma. So on campus, you can access the Equity, Human Rights, and Accessibility Office. You can call campus security. You can also contact the resident service desk and ask for the manager that's on staff at that time. You can connect with the student council, or you can access external services. So if you're in Sudbury, you can access the local Sudbury police, the number is there. If you're on Manitoulin, if you're in Little Current, then you can access the number there as well if you'd like to file a report. Now, talking a lot about allyship, because allyship is so key to this conversation. I don't want you to think I'm talking to you as potential victims or as potential perpetrators. I'm talking to you as people who are part of the Cambrian community. And I want you to be really informed on what you can do to be a solid ally and frankly, a solid friend to the people in your life who might be in crisis. So if your friend discloses to you, let's say your friend pulls you aside and tells you, I've been kind of off because this thing happened to me. Or you notice that your friend is really kind of not as social as they used to be, and you check in with them and they tell you because they're dealing with an assault. Believe them. Believe them. Your friend is telling you this because they're your friend. Too often in our culture, we start from this place of doubt, of questioning, of grilling people with questions. And we need to stop doing that. Our friends are telling us this because they trust us. If someone discloses to you that they've been sexually assaulted, it's because they trust you. And it's because they want something from you. They want something to be done about it. And so you want to start from that place of believing them. And it's only considered controversial to believe survivors because we think that means, then the person they've accused needs to go to jail right now without any trial and needs to be brought there for the rest of their lives. No, not at all. But if it's someone that you know who has told you that they've been harmed, we need to start from a place of course I believe you. I believe you because you're my friend. I believe you because there's no reason for you to lie about this. And so we want to start from a place of belief, not grilling, not questioning, but belief. Then we want to ask them what they want to do next. We are going to constantly try to give that person as much power as we can in that moment. So asking them, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. How can I help? What can we do? And maybe your friend just told you that because they want you to know, hey, don't take it personally. I'm not ghosting you as a friend. I'm just really dealing with something right now. Maybe your friend doesn't know what their options are and they're asking you because they're really needing to talk to someone. Or maybe they do need that academic accommodation. They need to, an extension on their paper and they just don't even know where to start. You cannot make assumptions about what your friend needs, And we should never make assumptions about what any survivor needs, whether we know them or not. Always start from the place of belief, followed by, what do we do next? What do you feel comfortable doing? And then refer them to support services. There's no I'm not putting an expectation on you, certainly. So there'd be no expectation on you that you can be that person's sole support. That's just not realistic. You're not an expert in this stuff. You're not a counselor, nor should you have to be. But it doesn't mean as everyday people that we can't still be allies. It just means we have to be clear about what our boundaries are and what we can and cannot offer that person. So find them the counseling services if that's what they're looking for. Connect them with an academic advisor to figure out their accommodations. Connect them with the equity office. Really referring them, because again, when we're dealing with a traumatic event, sometimes we're all discombobulated and we can't really think straight because we're just so overwhelmed by everything going on. So being able to be that clear voice for someone that says, hey, okay, so you really want to talk to someone? Okay, so here's the number. Do you want me to come with you? Do you want me to come to the appointment? Do you want me to make the phone call? Like really just trying to offer them as much support as you can, understanding that you're not their therapist, nor should you be. And on that note, you're also entitled to seek out your own supports. Being a friend to someone who's going through crisis is really important. We all deserve friends who show up for us when things are tough. But those friends also deserve to have someone to lean on. And we don't want you to share your story, your friend's story to everyone because we want you to maintain that confidentiality. But that doesn't mean you've got to bottle up your friend's experience and not share it with anyone. You can access support services. You can call a crisis line. You can go and chat with someone from the equity office and really make sure that you're getting the support that you need so that their experience doesn't drown you out and make it difficult for you to continue with your work. We need to have this conversation, folks. And I know it's uncomfortable, and I know it kind of makes us a little bit itchy, but we're dealing with a huge systemic problem across every campus in this country. So in Canada, 1 in 10 women experienced a sexual assault in a post-secondary setting during the previous year. So in 2019, 1 in 10 women experienced a sexual assault on a post-secondary campus. 47% of students at Canadian post-secondary institutions witnessed or experienced discrimination on the basis of gender, gender identity, or sexual orientation in the past year. 71% of students at Canadian post-secondary schools either witnessed or experienced unwanted sexualized behavior in a post-secondary setting. And 4 out of 5 undergraduate students surveyed at Canadian universities reported experiencing dating violence. This is a huge problem that, again, is not unique to Cambrian, but what we can make unique is how we respond to it, how we react, how we address the behavior. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about what it means to be an ally, and let's talk about how we can show up for folks on our campuses, not just after they've been harmed, to make sure they get the support that they need and the healing that they deserve, but also how can we prevent this stuff from happening in the first place? So 1, consider how you talk about sexual violence. Survivors are always listening. If every time a story hits the news, if every time there's a story kind of circulating on campus and your response is like, oh, who really knows what happened? Or, I don't know, it sounds like it happened a long time ago. So like, why even bring it up now? Why didn't you say something earlier? Any kind of doubt that you put out into the world, even when you're talking about like a pop culture story, for example, survivors are listening. And if they see that your response to these conversations is doubt, is cynicism, is questioning, then they're going to think, oh, if I share my story with them, they're also going to doubt me and question me and look at me sideways. So really be conscientious of, hey, if every time I hear a story about sexual assault, right away I think it's nonsense, what does that say about me? Why do I feel that way? Really do that internal self-reflection to figure out why that's your knee-jerk reaction. Secondly, set clear expectations for parties, for your events, for your hangouts. Growing up in Sudbury, where I'm from, we had parties and we had strict rules that if you came to a party and you drank someone else's alcohol, you were not welcome to come back to our party, because that was just a line that you just did not cross. We need to have the same attitude when it comes to harmful behavior, like sexual violence, sexual harassment. being clear, I can't control what you do when you're at home, what you do online, what you do when I'm not around. But when you come to my house, when you come to our events, our parties, we have clear expectations that we can party, we can have fun, but we're going to look out for each other. We're going to call out the folks that are preying on the drunk people at this party. And we're going to make it clear that if you do something that's harmful, you're not welcome to come back. Those are really difficult conversations to have. And I understand that we want to be jovial and we want to seem chill and like, oh, whatever. But really think about, what message are you sending when you set certain rules about certain behavior, but not others? We want to be clear what we expect of the folks that we hang out with. Knowing, like I said, you can't control what they do when they go home, but what they're in your life, when you're at your club, at your event, whatever the case may be, you have clear expectations of what you are expecting of the folks who are hanging out with you. And if you're ever worried about someone, whatever reason, whether it's someone looking uncomfortable at a party, someone who's just really not themselves, who's really withdrawn, really sullen, checking in on folks is something we need to normalize, not just so that sexual assault survivors feel supported, but also just people who are going through various forms of a mental health crisis, whether they're dealing with a recent mental health diagnosis, a death in their family, maybe they were outed by someone, maybe they came out and their family didn't support them. Like, there's so many reasons why folks are struggling, and we need to normalize just checking in, just asking people like, hey, how's it going? And meaning it and being open to hearing, not great. And not just having these surface levels like, hey, how's it going? Hey, how's it going? But really taking the time to be like, I see you. You don't seem like yourself. I just want to know what's up. Like, how can I help? We need to normalize that kind of behavior. And I promise you, it'll make a huge difference across so many different issues that folks are struggling with. Now, let's talk about what you can do if you witness sexual harassment, if you witness sexual assault, if you see it happening in front of you. Your primary concern needs to be the safety of the person being targeted. I cannot emphasize this enough. Too often, folks think bystander intervention means I have to educate the harasser. I got to go toe to toe with this creep to teach them a lesson. How else are they going to learn? Well, I'm here to tell you that your capacity to reason with someone who is by definition being unreasonable is pretty limited. But your capacity to get that target out of the situation, pretty good, pretty high chances of success there. So if you have to choose between telling this person off and getting the target out of the situation, always prioritize getting the target out of the situation. That is your number one priority. Secondly, be creative about it. So again, one of the big myths of bystander intervention is that my job is to show up there and just start telling people off, just start confronting people, just start kicking them out, making a big stink, really making a scene to show that what they're doing is not acceptable. Again, in an ideal world, that would be great. But is that always going to be successful? No. Is there a high likelihood that that could actually escalate the situation and make it more intense? Yeah. So think of really creative ways in which you can diffuse the situation and again, get the target or targets out of that situation. That can be starting up a conversation. If you're at a party and you see someone and they just look really uncomfortable, you can go up to them and just strike up a conversation and saying like, hey, oh my gosh, so sorry. But are you Sarah from class? Yeah, like we sit in the same lecture, don't we? Yeah, I didn't go to class last week. And so just make up an excuse to talk to that person. If you are, waiting for public transit, for example, seeing someone who's uncomfortable and going up to them and asking them for directions. I'm trying to get off at Notre Dame and this stuff, and I don't know where I'm going. Like, can you help me? Asking people for the time, pretending that you know them, complimenting their shoes, their bag, some part of their appearance that they had control over, just as an excuse to strike up a conversation with them. Because why that's powerful is that in doing that, the target can focus on you and ignore the person harassing them, and you've given them an excuse to get out of that situation. Or your split second of distraction gave that person enough time to get away from there, to go and ask for help, to go and find their friends. So using distraction is a really creative way that you can intervene that's still effective. Be chatty. So strike up a conversation with someone who looks like they're uncomfortable. standing between two people, or even moving your body to sort of block the view between the harasser and the target, being clumsy, drop your bag, spill something, stumble, make a scene nearby to what's going on, so that again, you can draw attention to yourself and away from the target, so that person can get away from the situation. And additionally, another way in which you can be creative is sometimes these things happen really quickly. Someone gets catcalled, someone gets groped, someone has something nasty said to them, and then the moment's passed, the harasser's gone, and you're sort of like, oh man, there's nothing I can do now. But there is. You can still check in on the person who was targeted and ask them how they're doing. Ask them if they need you to, wait with them while they call for help, or do you need to borrow my phone? Do you want to come sit with me and my friends? Even just letting them vent about how obnoxious that was or how scary it was, really make sure that people feel seen, and they're not going to blame themselves because you're a complete stranger and you've confirmed for them that what happened was not okay and it was not their fault. So they are far less likely to go home and spiral into this coulda, shoulda, woulda, because you made it very clear that, like, no, you were just minding your business and this person was all up in your space. So be creative and think beyond direct intervention, must confront the creep. Think beyond that and think, how can I do something that's non-confrontational, very passive, but still going to successfully get that person out of that situation? Ultimately, survivors do not need heroes. They need allies. It's not about you doing something big and bold so that everyone realizes how much of a hero you are and look at me, I took control of this situation. You really want to think of, what can I do that's simple, that's subtle, that's very passive, that will get that person out of that situation, that will make that person feel seen, that will make them feel supported, will confirm for them that they're not alone. I cannot tell you the amount of times in my life when I have locked eyes with a woman across a bar and then pretended to be her best friend just to get her out of a situation where this guy was not taking no for an answer. And we pretended to be BFFs. And the second we were out of earshot, she was like, oh my God, thank you so much. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. I have done that for countless women in my life, and I have had it done for me by countless women in my life. So we do these things a lot, but we don't necessarily think of it as bystander intervention. But that's what we mean, is these really subtle ways in which you can connect with someone, check in with them, make sure that they are okay. And if they're not, figure out how to help them. That goes beyond these like big confrontations that we know often lead to escalation. We're trying to de-escalate the situation, make the victim feel supported. That is our goal when it comes to effective intervention. And if we commit to doing these things, I promise you, we will make a huge change on campus culture, because it's really about sending a message to every single student on campus, every admin, every faculty, every single staff person, everyone on campus has the right to go to school, to go to work in safety. And if something does happen to them, they absolutely have the right to talk about it and to access support while still continuing to go to school and go to work. You all deserve to be here, and you all deserve to be here in safety. And so I really want to encourage you to think beyond just, how can I take care of myself, but how can I take care of others? And how can I send a message to the people in my world, in my class, in my cohort, and my res floor, whatever, that we have high expectations. We set high standards. There are things that we expect of folks when they come to our events or when they hang out with us, even socially. And if you're the kind of person that is harming others, I don't want you in my world. And that, once we do that more and more, we will normalize consent culture, which is ultimately what we're trying to do. So I really want to encourage you to think about how you can work to make Cambrian safe, how you can work to keep your friends and classmates and the people that you run into safer, and to really think about how, if this is something that you're interested in, doing some activism, getting involved, participating in events that are happening on campus, because we need this to be a continuous conversation that goes far beyond this conversation that we had together today. So welcome to Cambrian College, welcome to the Cambrian community. Cannot wait to have you here, and cannot wait to see the incredible work that you're going to do. Salut!